So this might become a semi-regular segment on my channel, where I talk about whether a critically panned movie or TV show was really that bad. Today I'm turning my attention to the 2015 film Terminator Genisys. So what's the story? Well, once again, John Connor is fighting tirelessly in the future to lead the resistance against Skynet and save humanity from the tyranny of the machines. But when the first T-800 Terminator is sent back in time, he's got to follow it back and stop it from trying to kill his mother, Sarah Connor, sometime in the 1980s, who, as we know, is pregnant with him. Of course, it's Kyle Reese who will ultimately go back in his place, but this time, just before Kyle travels back through the nudity is required time machine, John gets attacked by Skynet, and as it turns out, he gets taken over and ultimately replaced by a synthetic, nanorobotic, prototypical T-3000. Yes, John Connor will later become the villain of this movie, a massive smack in the face to the legacy of the franchise, the vandalization of a beloved character, and a bit of a middle finger to the fans, if I'm honest. Reese arrives back in LA in 1984, just like in the original Terminator movie. While that's happening, the film's highlight takes place, the jaw-droppingly awesome recreation of the famous scene from the original movie where Arnie first arrives. The CGI is literally perfect. It's shockingly authentic how they managed to recreate the younger Schwarzenegger, though the scene is obviously a bit different with different actors playing the thugs. But the dialogue and general tone of the scene is perfectly captured. That is until an older Terminator shows up and changes everything. The two Terminators fight until the original T-800 is crippled. As it turns out, this older Terminator was sent back even further in the timeline when Sarah was just a child in order to protect her, and he served as a kind of father figure ever since. His exterior human flesh has aged considerably over his endoskeleton. Obviously, this accounts for Schwarzenegger being in his late 60s at the time of making this film. Just like in the first film, Reese arrives back in 1984 to be chased down an alley by a cop, but this time the cop is actually a T-1000 liquid metal Terminator sent back through time. It's as if this film can't conjure 1 ounce of originality. Literally nothing about this film is in any way new. It simply takes pre-existing elements of the other stories and recycles them endlessly to produce a bastardized version of a Terminator movie. Reese is intercepted by Sarah Connor and Pops, that's the nickname for the old T-800. The film tries to flip the original movie on its head by having Sarah prepared for Kyle Reese's arrival. But in truth, Terminator Genisys just flips the original movie off by completely trashing its legacy. Also, I have to say, Emilia Clarke is a great actress, but horrendously miscast here as Sarah Connor. The original Linda Hamilton version grew into a believable action hero in the second Terminator movie, but at 5'2", Clarke just seems too diminutive and unbelievable as a tough chick. Thankfully, the stunning and brave feminist infiltration is of course on display, with Sarah telling Reese numerous times that she doesn't need him to save her. She don't need no man. Jai Courtney is okay in the movie, but I think he lacks the stature to play a compelling Kyle Reese. And I actually feel kind of bad for him because his character spends the entire movie just reacting and commenting on how unexpected every plot point is. He wasn't expecting to find Sarah already fully up to speed on the future and combat ready. He wasn't expecting to find her with her very own domesticated T-800 and that she's taught him some dumb jokes. He didn't expect that they'd have to time travel again into the near future, and he's shocked to find that John Connor is a bad guy. The guy really just serves as an on-screen representative for the audience. There's also an extra convoluted aspect to this film related to Kyle Reese's strange, dreamlike hallucinations of his childhood that relate to Genisys, a new operating system that will one day lead to the creation of Skynet. It pays off at the end, but it's one of those goofy time travel paradox elements that often derails movies that feature complicated time travel stories. The other aspect of this film that really troubled me was the dialogue, and I'm not sure if it was because they tried to make this film more accessible to a younger audience given the PG-13 rating, but some of the lines the actors deliver just sound cringe-inducingly hammy and juvenile. At least Schwarzenegger somewhat rescues things despite some goofy jokes that detract from the tone of the movie. Honestly, the first two Terminator movies were serious, but since then the series has occasionally descended into self-aware parody. Jason Clarke is also unconvincing as either good John Connor or evil John Connor. Neither interpretation works for me. Given everything the character of John Connor has been through in the previous films, making him the bad guy is a massive slap in the face. It's like remaking Star Trek and making Captain Kirk the villain. The fans would be livid with that. Anyway, the usual CGI-filled action set pieces and narrow escapes lead us to a final showdown in Cyberdyne's headquarters. Connor fights Pops, he dies, and Pops sacrifices himself to save Sarah and Kyle Reese. But Pops falls into some mimetic polyalloy and gets upgraded, for no real reason, to a T-1000 style Terminator. They all live happily ever after, apparently, driving off into the distance, and the credits roll. Terminator Genisys is a bad sci-fi Hollywood movie by any measure. Poorly cast, poorly written, no tension or suspense, zero sense of urgency. The resolution to the conflict was ultimately predictable. The story borrows heavily from better Terminator movies, and it could be argued it just goes back in time and literally vandalizes their legacy. So the question is, was Terminator Genisys really that bad? Yes, it was. This film crystallizes everything wrong with Hollywood right now. The story is actually a perfect metaphor for the industry's creative bankruptcy. Writers can't come up with anything original nowadays, so they rehash classics, rebooting, reimagining, and remaking great films of the past to produce lackluster replicas, approximations of much lesser quality, and without any of the heart and sentiment that made the originals great. This film ultimately has no sense of its own identity, making it feel empty, without any substance. The first Terminator film I saw as a kid was Terminator 2 on VHS. And I'm reminded of what happens when you take a VHS tape and proceed to make a copy of it over and over. If you make a copy of a copy again and again, the quality fades. You can't retain the quality of the original master. And that's how I feel about Terminator Genisys.